Hi everybody, welcome back. I am your host, Joe J.F. Foster, and today we will be discussing the 1988 movie Killer Klowns from Outer Space. For those of you who don't know, this is a film that fell under the horror comedy genre, which I have previously discussed in another video, but this one I avoided because I wasn't sure how to, because it didn't fit into my list. But I did still enjoy this film. And so today as I said, I'm going to discuss it. But some things about this film. I'm not sure. To me, this one qualifies under the rules of the cult classic, as there are many today who enjoyed that. Initially, when this film was released, people didn't think it was going to go very far. They thought at best opening weekend was its best thing, and it did do that well then. But the premise of the movie is, like the title says, these alien clowns from outer space come to Earth and do a full-on invasion style thing in this small town, and and it's up to the people to stop them. An interesting note about this is that in the credits for this movie is that while the movie came out in 1988, for some reason the ending credits in it have it listed as 1987 copyrighted. The film was actually written, produced, and directed by three brothers, Charles, Edward, and Stephen. I can't pronounce their last name. The three would go on to open up a production company later on. Not later on, but before this, that were involved with the Large March claymation in Pee-wee's Big Adventure, and also the monster effects for 1986's horror comedy Critters. And the one who actually came up with the idea for the movie was Steven, because he was entertaining the idea of the scariest thought he could think of at the time. And this was actually recalled in an interview in 2011. He imagined driving up a lonely mountain and somebody passing him on the left. Turned to see who it was, and it was a clown. Well, he brought it to his brothers. And Charles actually came up with the twist of, instead of it being a clown, was that it was in fact an alien who was levitating over the ground. And they took this idea and turned it into a full movie script. But the thing is that the way that this idea the idea they came up with, there's a scene in the movie that this actually reminds me of, which makes me think that maybe they threw this in with that as a way of showing it. And now this one's a slight spoiler warning, and that's that the clown's explosive noses were actually an homage to zombie cinemas of previous decades. Again, revealed in 2011, this time at the Spooky Empire Horror Convention by the brothers. Their idea was shoot the nose, kill the clown, which reflected the previous zombie movies where you shoot the brains, kill the zombie. Which means to me they were not just fans of the zombie genre, but also of the B-rated horror films of the 50s and 60s. The 50s in general. Something I didn't pay attention to is that there's a character in this that was played by Christopher Titus. This was actually Christopher Titus's very first film, and many of you would recognize Christopher Titus for the sitcom Titus. And he even admits that to this day, he is still approached by fans of the film who recognize him and ask him to sign DVDs and other items for him. Another, okay, and we're about to get into spoiler territory. There's a pie scene in this movie, very funny, where traditional clowns use top pies. Well, it's the same idea. It's the pie throwing idea that clowns have. Well, in this one, it was more complex than Brothers' plan because the brothers decided they wanted to use actual pies rather than just filling them with shaving cream and firing them. Well, for this, they needed the colored fillings and the pie crust, but they realized getting hit in the face by the pie tin was by the pie was painful. This was actually this was actually a quote by Charles. Then Charles came up with an idea. Instead of firing the whole thing, stick your fingers through the tin, and while holding on to a wristband on the back of each pie, on each of the tins, they could launch the pie without ever letting go of the containers. And and another fun part is that other actors actually got in on this, which means it could have been them just having fun, or it could have been that the person who managed to get the pie thrown in their face during this was actually not that well liked, and this was kind of like them getting revenge on him. Okay. The opening theme for the movie is also called Killer Clowns from Outer Space, was done by the band called the Dickies. Well, turns out they did the same thing that was done with the people that did the theme for the blog. The people that did the theme for the blog. They didn't know they hadn't seen the script, hadn't had any knowledge of the film exactly. They went off what the title of the movie was and wrote something. And it turns out they just happened to be right with this gut reaction. The main difference between the Blob and the Dickies version of Killer Clowns was that instead of a saxophone type music, we got the punk rock jam or what was defined as a punk rock jam that was known. And wasn't all that good, despite it being a punk rock styling. But it wasn't so horrible that you would forget it. Another note is that this film has actually had a sequel that has been up for production for at least 29 years. And it's actually been proven that fans wanted a sequel, because somehow, like I said, this thing to me qualifies as a cult classic, but I didn't think people liked it that much, but it turns out they did. And one of the brothers, Steven, admitted that in 2016 that the film had been in production for that. Meant the film sequel had been in production for that long. Of course, he also said this while calling Hollywood fickle in the same podcast, which could explain why it's still in production to this day without actually getting made. Or, I'm sorry, in pre-production, I guess would be a more accurate term, as they haven't gotten a go-ahead to make it or tried to make it. Because I'm sorry, but you call Hollywood or some big business type like that fickle, it's probably going to come back to bite you in some way. Um, one idea they had for the sequel was that the one of the characters would have become considered the town drunk, and just and when he spoke about the clowns having previously attacked, the town wouldn't believe him until the day the clowns actually return and do attack. And another rumor they had, a rumor I found about it was that they actually had it that they were going to make it into a 4-part style for cable television instead of making it for theaters. Which I could actually see, because instead of, and this would cut down on production costs, this would make it easier. This would probably make it easier to get the cast set up. And when you put it on cable television, the problem is the editing. Because now you gotta face the censorship laws that movies get away with more often. And some other things about this. I actually saw this. Okay, I actually saw the Killer Clowns from Outer Space when I was a kid, not even 10 years old. And even then, I thought it was more funny than scary, and I still feel that way. And while I didn't originally get the idea of it being I don't really get what the idea of it is, other than clowns attack Earth. There's nothing really to it. But I can see now that I'm older how it became the hit that it has. Because while it's not grand and loving and a box office hit, like a lot of films did, like Scream or Friday the 13th or Halloween, it has its place as a reminder of the past. Much like the B-rated horror films of the 50s and the Goat, in the original House on Haunted Hill and the original 13 Ghosts did. And Wolf, and the story of the werewolf and the Wolfman and Frankenstein. All those creatures. The creature from the Black Lagoon. So it's got its place like those do. For how even the simplicity of a film can be great. You can actually end up making a good film. Now for my final notes. Like I said, this is an homage. In my personal view, this is an homage to 50s horror films, as well as the horror comedy type film in itself. So you get to enjoy it while at the same time getting the little scares. But if it was older, something tells me if this had been in the 50s, this film would have scared a lot more people and gotten a better scare rating than it did in the time it actually came out. And my final movie rating on this one is a B-. Some areas of the film could have been worked on to make it more to the horror genre, where we actually tried to scare people, while other areas went to the extreme of trying to make it scary, which drew the viewer away from it. And then by doing that, it draws them out of the film itself, which loses interest. So it kind of fit in the middle of it. So I would have given a C started to come up, but I think it was a little better than that with the way that they went with it in certain areas, and the fact that this could be seen as an homage to 50s horror films in general with the way it was done. and or those B-rated horror films, as a lot of people refer to them. And now, also, my final actual note on this, I recommend seeing it. And yes, as I stated, I consider it to be a cult classic. Now, if you've seen it, let me know your opinion on the movie and also what you think I should do for a future video. And till then, later.